This is Sybert signing into Red Alert Remastered on the map Arena Valley Extreme Mega. Which, as always, I think that just means that it has more gems. I don't remember. Someone explained it to me one time, and every time I forget. As the yellow allies in the north, this is Bruzer. And as the blue or cyan allies in the south, this is MrYuRi. Alright, we have 3 games in this video, all 3 allied mirrors. So if you don't want to see a bunch of medium tank fights, this may not be the one for you. Although, who knows? Anything could happen. Mirrored openings, I would expect, and probably a lot of medium tanks across the 3 maps. But we always look for that extra little bit of special sauce that some players bring to Red Alert Remastered. Big thanks to Hustle Respect here on YouTube. I think in-game he's known as Goku, but for suggesting not just like, hey, here's a replay you should check out, which, by the way, some people in the comments, they say, oh, the early map scouting is so easy. Yeah, but like when I play Red Alert Remastered, I never have good spreads of units, so I always appreciate when guys like Bruzer, MrYuRi is doing basically the same thing, a little bit less spread out, but he's covering all of his access points, and they're both doing such a good job of checking all of those boxes for the early scout to make sure that there isn't some kind of weirdness coming their way. And I'm so bad at doing this, and these guys are so much better than me. So yeah, it's a simple thing, but that early scout spread is looking so good. Maybe not perfect from MrYuRi, but so good overall. Anyways, Hustle Respect on YouTube was like, hey, you should do some more Red Alert Remastered, and I was like, hey, you should tell me which games are good. And he basically did that. He gave me 3 player matchups and time codes that I should check out. So he didn't just give me like one game, he gave me matchups, which is great because then I can take a look at a little range of games, and I personally don't like just looking at one Red Alert Remastered or Teckdoc Remastered game. Most of the time, the one game isn't super interesting. Occasionally it is. Someone does something funny or interesting, or the game goes in a weird way. But I really like what I've been doing recently in large quotes there, like for the last year, in 2021, which is to look at 3 games or so in a series from 2 players. So we get to see a matchup kind of change and evolve. We've got lots of light tanks coming out. I think I said medium tanks, but it looks like they're going to be spamming light tanks. And some allied players are the medium tank spammers, and some are the light tank spammers. And it looks like Bruzer and MrYuRi are the light tank guys. Occasionally, we will see one of these guys just run past the defenses and just absolutely go for the infrastructure, trying to kill the MCV before the service depot gets up. In this particular case, I don't know that he's actually going to get there. First couple of tanks are making it pretty deep into the enemy backline, but I don't think they'll have enough DPS to kill off this MCV before the reinforcements arrive. Although with 2 additional tanks showing up, he may just barely have enough. Great power plant block there by MrYuRi. If he loses this MCV, well, it's pretty close to lights out for MrYuRi, and just barely the repair is good enough. The rifleman, no reinforcements coming in for Bruzer, so MrYuRi will get the save on the MCV, but more tanks are coming in. It's going to be light tanks all day, all day. Good spread of refineries as well. Again, base creeping is, you know, we all do it, but I'm so much more slow. I'm so much slower at it than these guys. So these guys are base creeping right along very nicely. Light tanks just getting absolutely surrounded and destroyed. Bruzer starting to fall into the trap of getting really close to tipping the scales in his balance, falling short, and then just overcommitting to the continued attacks. He's losing basically more and more as time goes on. MrYuRi, through defense alone, is gaining a huge advantage, but of course, the real question is when MrYuRi crosses the map, how does he handle the attack? Because we can see the exact reverse happen, and Mr. Bruzer gain the advantage. More light tanks coming in this river causing some problems for MrYuRi. It's just a chaos of light tanks smashing into each other. A couple of riflemen coming in here for MrYuRi as well. Always good to distract those light tanks, make them waste their shots, or run around trying to go for the crush if at all possible. pretty consistent reinforcements, and Bruzer, even though he's got so much farther to drive, actually has a consistent stream of light tanks coming in. He's doing a really good job of reinforcing his push, and it looks like he's just going to try and start trading against the buildings. He's done trading army for army, tank for tank. He's going to try and go for the economy, and as those initial starting ore fields dry up, killing the external refineries can definitely be a way to try and gain an advantage in production. The MCV once again the target. I don't know that we have a service depot, so this might be the end of production. But no, 2 tanks not attacking. Over here, a second MCV has been spotted and destroyed, so there definitely is a service depot out there somewhere, although it may have been sold off. Power plants getting targeted. Bruzer trying to go for whatever he can. MrYuRi making a bit of a lapse, letting some of the tanks get out of his range and out of his control as refineries get targeted down. But now it's going to be the MC. There might be enough tanks here to burst this down before the reinforcements come in from MrYuRi. And good night, second MCV. So the production was extremely quick. That first MCV essentially having your production times, or excuse me, that first extra MCV having your production times. And then after that, the benefit reduces, but that first extra MCV is such a big deal in terms of building. And Bruzer just absolutely crushing it here in this game. We'll see if MrYuRi has what it takes to cross the map and just kill him. If it turns into a base race, Bruzer has a huge advantage. 3 tanks manage to sneak through the defense, although they get routed back in with the tanks on the retreat for Mr. Bruzer, who probably wants to play a little bit defensive from this point on, assuming an MCV didn't escape somewhere out on the map. And actually, one did. Another MCV managed to escape. I'm not sure where he's pulling these MCVs from, but he's certainly got enough production to sneak one out, and that might be the thing that saves it for MrYuRi. Bruzer gonna have to pull back for just a moment here. Might be trying to draw the army out of position, but almost certainly MrYuRi has vision up here and is gonna know about that army sitting there. Bruzer regrouping. Bruzer been doing a really good job of base creeping and expanding, taking over a big section of the northern map, northern half of the map. Units coming in. Bruzer realizes it. He sees the extra MCV. He's coming in for the attack. At the same time, trying to hit the original main base. Mr. Bruzer all on offense this game. MrYuRi all on defense. The MCV gets targeted once more, and it looks like the ore refinery is going to get shut down as well. A little more base creep coming out for MrYuRi. Another power plant gets sniped. Mr. Bruzer, or just Bruzer, not actually Mr. Bruzer, is going to have more and more stuff that he's going to have to finally put out if he ever gets across the map to start attacking Bruzer. MrYuRi is going to have a hard time locking everything down. And again, if it comes down to the base race, Bruzer has gained himself a huge advantage in that. Yurii splits off a huge tank force over to the left side of the map. He's been playing defensive for so long that he's still got a sizable tank force back at home to defend. It's light tank versus light tank in a huge massacre in the middle of the map. Meanwhile, MrYuRi making good progress against Bruzer on the left side, and he's going to be just trying to push up further and further into the north. Another MCV comes on out, and it looks like the tanks are making their way for the main base of Bruzer. MrYuRi trying to initiate some kind of base race. The radar dome and the MCV packed tightly together, and MrYuRi is going to be able to get both of them pretty darn quickly here. Bruzer trying to defend his own assault has backed off somewhat as he's focused on offense on the other side of the map. War factories getting targeted down, trying to slow that production of Bruzer, stop those tanks from crossing the map, and MrYuRi with a significant tank force getting whittled down, still trying to get kill after kill so that he can just cut down that production of Bruzer. And it looks like he's going to try and meet in the middle, crush Mr. Bruzer from both sides, as MrYuRi coming up from the south, now going to be attacking the base crawl in the southern position. There is one MCV that has managed to escape out to the right side of the map. Tanks coming in from the south, but Bruzer has split off another attack group trying to deal with MrYuRi's fresh expansion, once again sneaking out an MCV. I mean, it doesn't take that long to build an MCV, so sneaking one out isn't too difficult. The defense is kind of here for MrYuRi, but it's just not engaged. Radar Dome going to get taken down, although it's medium tanks starting to be mixed into this army by Bruzer, and he barely isn't going to get that Radar Dome. Just the engineer jumps inside of it. It looks like MrYuRi crawling back up to the north, and Bruzer calls it quits. After all of that attacking, all of those move outs, he just wasn't able to get the kill. And in the end, MrYuRi takes game number 1. That'll do it for this first match. Let's jump into the next one, which takes us to Tournament or Rift for game number 2. And I'm going to have a real trouble with this one because they actually did switch colors, even though they are the same factions. We have as the yellow, MrYuRi playing UK, playing England, playing the Allies, rather. And in the south, also playing UK, also playing Allies. This is Bruzer. Swapping colors. MrYuRi managing to bring out the win in that one. Rifleman going for the scout, maybe into medium tanks, just, nothing but medium tanks. This map, a bit different. I was going to say no water, but I guess technically there is water. But yeah, functionally, no water. Definitely not a naval map. Not that Arena Valley Extreme is a naval map, but at least Arena Valley Extreme has the rivers, which sort of break up the map. This one, a much more traditional, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the word symmetrical. A symmetrical design, unlike the original maps that shipped with the game. We instead have just regular old normal competitive map for, after this game originally came out. It's kind of interesting that today the idea of an asymmetrical map, even a 3-player symmetrical map where, the map is like rotationally symmetrical, but there are not locked spawning locations, and so you can have different spawning positions relative to your opponent. Even that sort of thing is a bit controversial in RTS. Ooh, barracks sell off there. Second War Factory is up for Bruzer, so his production is going to be pretty healthy for the remainder of the game. MrYuRi a little slower on the Second War Factory, but I don't think that'll be a problem. Ooh, actually, he drops the refinery first, so another 40 seconds after that for his second refinery, or second war factory to get up. Bruzer, on the other hand, pumping out just a lot of light tanks, and actually he's going cross-map, so pretty much the longest distance that you can go, but his tank production is, essentially double that of MrYuRi, who is maybe just a little bit strapped for cash and having some difficulties getting out his units. And Rifleman sneaking in. There's going to be the power plant and the sell-off of one of the war factories. This is how MrYuRi gains his advantage, but will it be enough? Because the army has, by and large, already been constructed by Bruzer, so he's going to jump on in here. He's going to be able to dive on this refinery. No, he's going straight for the MCV. There's the power plant to try and block off this bit from being attacked, forcing these tanks to go a smidge further, and there was a second war factory out, so the production is going to even up for MrYuRi, but it may not matter if he isn't able to get out a service depot, which I doubt he has deployed at this point, so he may be just out of luck in terms of building anything else. Here the Riflemen coming in. They do get crushed a little bit by that ore truck heading out on its job. Classic thing for an ore truck to do is to run over anyone that it can on its way to work. That's what we all love about the ore truck, and the tanks are getting whittled down. Bruzer gonna be getting pushed away. However, the damage, it looks like, may be done. The tanks are just running past those juicy Riflemen, waiting to take them out, and there the crush is finally going to be coming in. MrYuRi with a lapse in control there, not using some of those tanks to just get the kill on those infantry, and instead letting his war factory go down. Now, if he wants to rebuild an MCV, if he managed to sneak out a service depot at some point, it'll take a whole minute because he lost that second war factory. So his rebuild is going to be extremely slow. Perhaps his only chance is to race across the map and try and go for a base race. Now, of course, it looks like Bruzer sold off his MCV, so there is no rebuild for Bruzer. It's all in for him. It's light tanks still all the way, and of course, MrYuRi may not actually realize that the cash boost to get this initial attack started came from an MCV cell, and just now MrYuRi is probably realizing that if we had chat replay, he would probably be saying some stuff in chat, but that will do it. It looks like Bruzer is going to be able to take the game, and yes, indeed he does. MrYuRi with a critical miscalculation, not realizing that Bruzer got ahead by selling his MCV and then just going straight for the double War Factory build, and of course that's why he was never able to rebuild his War Factory, never had any chance of rebuilding. MrYuRi could have won that game if only he knew. The scout wasn't strong enough for MrYuRi. He didn't put the pieces together. But other than that, a great strat from Bruzer. Very well executed. So that takes us into game number 3. And that takes us to Bullseye, the map, which is aptly named. You know, some of these names are a little bit more obscure, but this one is pretty darn clear. This one, I like watching matches on this. I don't like playing this because, again, I'm terrible at scouting. I always get surprised, even though there's really only 2 basic attack paths. As soon as I start trying to expand out and get my eco going, I always mess it up. Anyways, in the south, as the Cyan, this is MrYuRi. Once again, swapping colors on us. And in the north, as the yellow, it's Bruzer, who I will endeavor to not call Mr. Bruzer. We got a 1 win from each of them, but MrYuRi's win was... Wait a second. Now I'm suddenly confused. MrYuRi, I think, winning game number 1, but I can't remember because it's been like all of 5 minutes and I just forget things. But I think 1-1 for this video. And these guys tussling it out with riflemen. Big group of riflemen coming in. No grenadiers packed along for either player, so it's just going to be straight riflemen versus straight riflemen. And it looks like Bruzer gaining a huge advantage there because MrYuRi attacked into his prepped forces. First War Factory comes up for Bruzer and MrYuRi. Riflemen coming down, crossing the river, the extreme Bullseye River. And MrYuRi going to be able to hold that off quite nicely. Even if he didn't, he could have called an ore truck in to do the dirty work for him. Extra ore trucks being added on for both players. MrYuRi with a pretty good scouting path. Gets 80% of the map that is relevant to him. Bruzer a little bit less clear on the scouting path. He's got most of the information that's relevant to him. This whole section of the map is blank, which could be a problem. And then, as you can see, he's doing the anti-sneak attack route, which is to send just a single rifleman along the outer edge, kind of backwards from where you would expect the tanks to be coming from if they're taking the shortest route possible. So both players doing an okay job with the scouting. I think MrYuRi doing a little bit more of a complete scout, a little bit more of a thorough idea. And certainly after getting MCV sold into a light tank rush, you want to make sure that your opponent hasn't done something similar. Second War Factory is up. Meanwhile, it's going to be the second refinery in the south and the second War Factory in the north for Bruzer. So they're both doing a very similar base crawl to their expansion. Once you get past those first 2 ore fields, it gets kind of awkward. I think most players go for the MCV move to the inside and maybe try and go for the gems, but that's to the point where it becomes a bit more vulnerable to jump on the other player. You've got a bit more exposed as soon as you try and move to the inside and set everything up in there. I feel like that's where some of these Bullseye maps matches start to collapse. And ooh, Bruzer going for the gems pretty early. MrYuRi does have vision of this, so he will know that the gems are being stolen. Well, I don't know that he'll be able to do anything about it other than just steal the gems himself. It looks like he's sending... no, that ore truck was just waiting. Light tanks v light tanks in the middle of the map, and Bruzer not actually sending his ore truck to harvest, so it's just sitting around doing nothing. He's just down on income right now because he's more focused on this tank fight. MrYuRi reinforcing, Bruzer doing the same. Bruzer still, that ore truck sitting there, lessening his efficiency on the economy. Reinforcements are a little closer for MrYuRi, but Bruzer is still, again, doing a really good job of reinforcing despite the distance. MrYuRi may end up losing an ore truck here. Bruzer closes in. Gonna have to let that one go. Light tanks coming in for MrYuRi. Bruzer's got the tank numbers advantage, but is that going to hold up as reinforcements popping directly into the fight for MrYuRi? And it looks like he's got enough of an edge here to push back Bruzer. Give him a shove out of his land. Although this does make this section of the map somewhat inaccessible for MrYuRi. And Bruzer still doing a good job. He's got 5 tanks here. He could try and dive on some infrastructure and just run past the tanks of MrYuRi. He's going to go for it. Might be able to get the MCV. No, goes for the power plant instead. The more secure kill, the easier to take down object. And the reinforcements coming in strong still for Bruzer. He's going to try and burst down the MCV. MrYuRi here for the defense, but it's not good enough. We'll see if MrYuRi has managed to sneak out a service depot at some point, but he hasn't kept it around. If he did, he can still get the MCV. It'll only take 30 seconds with the 2 war factories. Not as nice as if you have additional war factories, but, you know, you're on the edge of losing it once, and then that can cause some real production problems if you lose just a single war factory. This ore truck's still just sitting there. That is the distraction for MrYuRi. I don't know that it's working super well. MrYuRi, I think, has stolen 2 loads of gems, maybe even 3, from the middle of the map without Bruzer stopping him. MrYuRi's still just pumping out more and more light tanks. He does have a couple of them here for defense. Maybe it was a bad rally. Maybe he just forgot about them. But either way, they are here for the defense when Bruzer shows up. Another light tank pops on out. Every power plant might be critical, but the production facilities definitely more useful. MrYuRi's income, it looks like, is outstripping his production. So if he loses a war factory, he will definitely be in a bad spot. Power plant getting targeted, but finally, MrYuRi manages to strike it down. All right, Bruzer's trying to manage the defense. He's going for the body block. He's forcing the tanks to reroute. As long as these tanks are wasting time in the middle of the map, they're not attacking Bruzer's infrastructure, and Bruzer is happy about that. MrYuRi closing in. Is he going to be able to cross the river and head for that ore refinery or perhaps the war factory? MrYuRi getting dangerously close, but he's happy to just trade tanks. He thinks he can keep the production up and keep this in a favorable position in the middle of the map. Actually, if he keeps stealing gems from the middle of the map, he may indeed be able to outproduce him. Bruzer's still with a good income to production ratio, though. Tanks coming in for both players. The reinforcements being really well controlled to just consistently move up to the battle. Bruzer may have a bit of an edge to be able to start shoving MrYuRi back. Even manages to drop a pillbox there for the defense, making it harder for MrYuRi to break. Bruzer swings into the south, and the reinforcements from MrYuRi may now be able to catch up with the reinforcements and the tanks of Bruzer. Bruzer getting pushed closer, or pushing closer and closer to MrYuRi's base. And yet, looks like at no point MrYuRi managed to sneak out a service depot. So what you see is what you get. Bruzer, if he can, needs to sneak off maybe 3 or 4 tanks along the top side of the map and kill these refineries. That would significantly hamper the income of MrYuRi. Maybe he doesn't even need to do that, as he seems to be winning the tank fight at the front. But again, as he steps closer to MrYuRi's base, is he just going to get overwhelmed himself? Tanks trading pretty even, as always, with these kind of light tank fights. It's almost more about the reinforcements than it is about the guys on the front line at this moment. Generally, most players trade pretty evenly. They're both getting desperately low. Reinforcements still just constant. No sneak attacks coming in for Bruzer, but Yurii is now out of cash, and this is the inflection point that Bruzer has been waiting for. It might just be too far to drive with no more base creeping available to MrYuRi. The long, slow death may finally have tipped over, and now it's about the base trade. He's going to get the ore truck going for the gems. He's going to get it pre-gems. So that does mean, you know, it dies empty, but at least it didn't steal the gems, at least for Bruzer. MrYuRi is just going to try and go for the base trade. He may still be able to pull something out here, despite being down in position. One ore truck going down. Is he going to go for the refineries to try and slow down the... Ooh, these pillboxes causing some problems. One war factory gets shut down. I think he's only got... No, he's got 3, so his production is still pretty good. I mean, he's still pumping out quite a few tanks rapidly. Another war factory going down. MrYuRi is about to have a production advantage, and I cannot believe it. He might actually get all 3 war factories with this one attack. At the same time, Bruzer may finally be able to just cross the map and kill the other guy, as when it comes to the base race, Bruzer has a huge advantage. I mean, even just the pillboxes help out a considerable amount in extending the life of his base. And now MrYuRi's only chance is to try and sneak out enough tanks before the war factories get rebuilt that he can manage the defense. No war factories online just yet. The first one going to be coming back up there, but it's going to be a minute before the other war factories are online, so that tank production does resume its normal pace for Bruzer. And now he's here. He's close enough that he can jump on the production of MrYuRi. He can shut this game down and take the W in this light tank war. And he's actually not interested. He's continuing to fight the tanks for longer than he really needs to. There's the refineries. There's the war factory. And this is the last leg of MrYuRi. Bruzer has closed in. Getting that MCV before the service depot really limited the options of MrYuRi. Now Bruzer just needs to shut down the war factory, and there's literally no production. The end is nigh. The GG gets called, and it looks like MrYuRi calls it quits. Bruzer fighting it out very even, these two going toe-to-toe, but ultimately MrYuRi not able to defend that MCV. Didn't sneak out the service depot soon enough, and that will do it for this match. Well fought, but ultimately Bruzer takes it. Thank you all very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this Red Alert Remastered action. Always fun to jump back into Red Alert Remastered. Very straightforward games. Sometimes we see the big Grenadier push, but in this case, it was as straightforward competitive Red Alert as you can get. Tons of light tanks. It's all about the production. It's all about the placement. And that will do it for this video, for these games. Thank you all very much for watching. Thanks to Hustle Respect for the recommends. And this is Sybert, signing out.